I've been thinking like the main threats to the global order that we have right now that is being backed by America and its global dominance and its military. The main threats against it is China, Russia, the Islamic Republic, and North Korea. These are the four main threats. Russia can't even take out Ukraine. So we're kind of okay. Seems like we're okay. Like, I'm not saying we should underestimate them, but they're not going to win, even though they're going to be a threat. I don't think once we get rid of the Islamic Republic, then the United States will be able to focus more of its military might on the remaining three, which is going to make it difficult for the remaining three to dominate. Russia is more of a threat to Eastern Europe in my like than United States, even though it is a threat. Always never underestimate your enemy. I understand that. But I don't think they're in any position to like defeat the United States. North Korea also seems to just be like it's not like the Islamic Republic that they want world dominance. They just like let us be evil right here and we will stop bothering the rest of you. Like it seems like that's more of a local problem than a global problem. So that just leaves us with mostly with China, right? To me, it seems like China is going to go through a demographic collapse at some point. It seems that they're making the mistake of the Soviet Union, thinking that technology and science solves everything, but they're making the mistake. When we had the Soviet Union versus the United States in the Cold War, United States was heavily investing in science and technology. But the reason why American science and technology beat the Soviet science and technology is because the investment in science and technology for the Soviet Union was from the top down, but in the United States, it was from the bottom up, meaning that it was private, it was competitive, it was Darwinian, it was very competitive. Entrepreneurship, the entrepreneurial spirit in the United States is much stronger than these other countries, and that's why eventually United States science and technology, like basically overcame like whatever Russia was, Soviet Union was doing. And I think that a lot of people in China are impressed by the solar panels that are coming out of China. But I think that because they don't have a strong private sector and because their GDP is like too much focus on government spending and export and not much, and the part of the GDP that is about domestic spending is so small, and the Chinese people have not been invested on like as much as the American people. I think the American people are very productive. The Chinese people, China has kept Chinese people poor on purpose to be able to control them, and because it has a unhealthy GDP because it's too like a healthy GDP is a GDP that is basically balanced among all four, right? A GDP is like a GDP of a country is exports, is government spending, is domestic consumption, and then it's the what is the other one? Oh, government is investments, basically business investments, right? So also the export is exports minus imports, actually the first one that I mentioned, right? And China is so reliant on some of these, and is keeps because it wants to be able to continue because it tries to be competitive and from in the export market to keep the prices low. It needs to keep the cost of labor low in China, and that's why it doesn't really invest in making the Chinese people rich so that it's competitive when it comes to its export market. And I think that is very unhealthy and eventually is going to break apart. And even though short-term results when it comes to solar panels and robots might be interesting, it doesn't produce the level of technology that you see from a country that is a technology and science is growing because the private sector is strong. And that's why I think to me, this looks like the West is going to win long term if I'm looking at it. I understand that all of these countries are a threat and we have to take them seriously. But with the fall of the Islamic Republic and the embarrassing performance of Russia in Ukraine and Chinese demographic collapse and the fact that they're repeating the mistake of the Soviet Union, I am optimistic about the future of the world. You're not that optimistic. Okay, go ahead. Tell me why I'm wrong.
You hit about 20 different issues.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
All right. So you're not wrong in the sense that different actors that comprise the autocratic bloc, or sometimes they're called the CRINC, right? That's just like an acronym they use for it, are focusing on the respective geographic regions and or theaters. true from a conventional perspective, right? So China's focusing on Taiwan, Putin's focusing on Europe, and the Mullah regime's focusing on the Middle East, and the North Koreans are focusing on pissing off South Korea and Japan. You know, there's truth to that. That being said, that doesn't mean they don't coordinate their efforts amongst each other. As far as from a traditional, it's almost like you're framing the overall capability from just traditional, conventional, and strategic warfare fighting indexes. And when it comes from that perspective, that's true. The United States will kick your ass right up between your shoulder blades. Tragically, for the same reason why we got to take down the Mullah regime, the operational impact of global socioeconomic and technological trends, right, and revolutionary technologies, which minimize entrance barriers regarding transaction costs and all this other stuff that I talked about and wrote about, it enables increasing amount of actors asymmetric counters to traditional conventional strategic warfare fighting indexes, which is exactly why Putin and Xi both adopted things like hybrid warfare. You kind of talked about like the structural aspects of the Chinese Communist Party vis-a-vis their economy as well as their demographics. So it's true that the Chinese Communist Party in China itself, because of the negative aspects of the one kid per couple program, has like a demographic bomb that's going to hit them, the likes of which is maybe only seconded by what is going to hit Russia. And so that's true. Long term sustainability without having things like automation, robots. That's actually why the Chinese Communist Party is investing in robots to offset the lack of physical or human capita. Actually, wrote one of the white papers that underwrote Rubio's Made in China 2025 report back, this is 10 years ago. If you want to, one of these days, I'll let you read that. It definitely undermines the ability of the Chinese Communist Party from a traditional measurement of comprehensive national power, one of the main indexes in Latin power, which is population. It's also going to incentivize the Chinese Communist Party to engage in an all or nothing gambit and or engage in diversionary war. That's one of the reasons why they'll probably hit Taiwan. I very much love that you mentioned the net international investment position. Again, there's economics. That's the beginning of that's how traditional economics is looked at. There's a lot of other things that kind of play into how effective you are. I'm very pro free market, Armin. I'm not an ANCAP. There are things where you have to have public sector involvement, right? So public like marketing perfection defined as a public need but on a market niche, dynamic learning curve, first mover advantage, provided the public sector can fix the problem, the benefits of the cost is greater than the fix, and the public approach towards fixing it is a net sum positive measured against mixed or private approaches towards fixing it, provided it's an investment in productivity. There's a big difference between, say, sending somebody to school with outdated skill sets so that they can be competitive and increase in a new the leading sectors in current supplanting K waves, which is a Kondratiev wave. It's based on a Soviet economist who hated socialism and very much wanted to, have the Soviet adopt a capitalist system. He was actually thrown in a gulag in the 50s. Stalin hated him. You know, there's a difference between doing that and say what leftists do, which is I'm going to subsidize your consumption of non-leading core goods and services. Like I'm going to give you EBT to buy beer and potato chips. So all that to say, you're from a traditional analytical perspective, you're not wrong. It's just there's other things that broaden the analysis, particularly as it exists now. AI, robotics, the impact of what is it, globalization, which is now delinking, thank God, particularly when it comes to the transition of goods or knowledge, or the what is it, the diffusion of technological knowledge from the core to the periphery, right? So the Chinese Communist Party set up its strategy after Mao died for special economic zones, particularly in China, that had max amount of dual purpose capability between civilian and military capability, right? The reason the Chinese Communist Party did that is because it wanted to exacerbate not only knowledge of the product, knowledge of the process. Yeah. So it's true that the United States has a lot of productivity here. That said, we have to address, because of the impact of those global socioeconomic and technological trends, which exacerbates technical diffusion from the core of the periphery and subsequent change in locus of innovation. There's some things we got to do. So we're in the process of doing that. That's why Donald sat there and said, we're going to do Project Stargate. We're investing hundreds of billions of dollars in AI. Take a guess who played a role. And we're going to sit there and organize all the information so that it can be read by machine intelligence. And that way, whoever beats whoever will no longer be dependent upon human capita, only Skynet. That's what we're doing. So is the Chinese Communist Party. Everybody's figured it out, Armin. Right? My
Right.
mom played a role. Hold on. My mom played a role in the peripheral research during the 80s for the Strategic Computing Initiative, which was the sister program to SDI or Star Wars. That was Star Wars's brain. Yes, there's a reason why this is what again what makes Putin so deadly. He realized something. He said, "He who gets strong artificial intelligence first will control the world." Everybody's figured it out. Yes, everybody's figured it out, Armin. So now we have to win that race because if you lose that race, it won't matter how efficient your people are. You're not going to outwork a robot.
Yeah. So a couple of points. First of all, when it comes to being local, I was mostly talking about North Korea and Russia's inability to be global. But I think China has a global presence and the Islamic Republic has global ambitions, right? But the Islamic Republic hopefully will be out the picture soon, so we don't have to worry about that as much anymore. When it comes to AI and robotics, that everybody understood that this is going to completely change the game, right? What I was trying to say is that I believe the United States is in the best position to take advantage of this new age of AI and robotics, of this fourth round of the Industrial Revolution. I think, yeah, everybody understood this and understand China and Russia also understood this. I just keep believing that free markets and not having a top down approach into trying to manage all of this is the best way to lean into all of this, right? I think like Putin realizing this and also the CCP realizing this, they're going to be able to, because it's command economy, because it's centralized control over their businesses, they're going to be able to do certain things that is going to look very impressive. And it is very impressive for the short term. But when you have free markets and a democracy, shorter term, you're going to do you're going to have things that are less impressive, but longer term, you're going to produce better results. It's basically the difference between a family that is living on credit cards and has so much to show, goes on the best trips, eats at the best restaurants, and people think they must be doing something right, and another family that is showing less impressive short term results, but it's going to outlast you, right? And I think the American model is eventually going to again prove that just like it worked with any other industrial revolution, the competitive model, the free model, the private sector model has always worked better in every single industrial revolution. And I think with AI and robotics is going to again show that it's superior to the Russian and the Chinese model. That's what I'm betting on. But go on, Jeffrey.
So you're not wrong again from a traditional, and I'm not disagreeing with you, Armin. I'm just trying to expand the assessment and tighten the shot group. Autocracies traditionally are very good at maximizing short-term relative comprehensive national power because they're dictatorial. They have tightened decision cycles, right? They don't have to debate. And representative republics are usually very good at long-term sustainability because they have a more diverse economy. One of the things that undermines autocracies is their disproportional focus on military expenditure, like the Soviet Union, and it came at the cost of investing in civil stuff, right? So they crumbled. They traded in an empire of, let's say, silver for one of iron and rust. So here's the key spot, though. Putin's criminalized counterintelligence state and the Chinese Communist Party learned from the Soviets' mistake. They do not have socialist economies, they have a state capitalist economy, which is very much the contemporary form of corporate nationalism or the economic element of Italian fascism. That has it's more capable at sustaining itself, not as much as representative republics, to be sure. That said, when you're in the race we're in right now, it used to be back in the Second World War, we could absorb a first hit and then because oceans protect us, transform all our stuff and we crush you, right? The infinite game selected for us because the enemy couldn't give us a knockout blow. That is no longer the case, bro. Right? AI, robotics, orbital space dominance, advanced biotechnology. They give every actor, and increasingly smaller actors, knockout blows, which is again why the Mullah regime has to go.
Just one last point, guys. I completely agree that state capitalism is not as limiting and dysfunctional as communism or socialism. However, it's still more limiting compared to proper capitalism, and it's a command economy. And I know you agree with me on that, but it's still dysfunctional compared to a free market capitalism.